Hey folks, Saber4 here with a requested leader. I had a poll up for a couple of days and about 80 of you responded, and so we're going with your choice. Saber4 is going to give you Darth Vader. Now, what's going to be in here? We're going to take a look at our leader. We're going to take a look at aggression tools, command tools, vigilance tools, and cunning tools. We're going to see decks for each one of them, and so with aggression tools, you're going to see the deck with aggression. With command, you're going to see the deck with command. With vigilance, you're going to see Vader blue. And with cunning, we're going to take a look at a Vader yellow deck. And we'll give you some final thoughts and as I said, the deck list with each aspect. First off, Darth Vader, Dark Lord of the Sith. What does he do for us? He is an aggression villainy leader. His leader ability allows us to use one resource and exhaust that leader. If you played a villainy card this phase, deal 1 damage to a unit and 1 damage to a base. His epic action is available at 7 resources. He is a 5 power, 8 HP Force Imperial Sith unit. And on attack, you may deal 2 damage to a unit. Keep in mind that does cross arena. So he can deal 2 damage to a unit anywhere on the board. Aggression Toolbox. Now this is not a definitive list of what's in aggression, but these are some of the better cards that I like that use the villainy synergy, so are able to turn around and use Vader's ability. They're listed here by resource cost, and at 1 we have the Death Star First Order Stormtrooper. Force Throw and Force Lightning are also in here, though Force Throw we know is a red neutral card. Kylo's TIE Silencer, Allegiant General Pride, Vader's Lightsaber, and Force Choke. At 3 we've got Fifth Brother, Fallen Lightsaber. At 4 IG-2000. The Imperial Interceptor are both great options. At 5, we have the Seventh Sister and Darth Maul, the unit Darth Maul who can attack 2 units at once. 6, Kylo Ren, Ruthless Raider, and the Darth Vader Jump to Lightspeed unit. And then at 8, we have Emperor Palpatine, Devastator, and Count Dooku. I have in here the 2 lightsabers because we wind up using these quite a lot over the course of these decks. Fallen Lightsaber obviously can go on any Force unit. Vader's lightsaber is best when given to Vader, but it is 1 resource cheaper, and it will allow you in certain cases to play Vader's lightsaber onto a unit that's on the table and activate the ping from Vader. So let's take a look at an aggression deck. He was the best star pilot in the galaxy. Here we have Vader, and since we are restricted by color to the Vader that can be a pilot, we went with some piloting tools. You'll notice that I have several options here at 1 cost to be able to ping units early. And so we have the opportunity several times to be able to use Tarkin Town if we need to get something out of the way. A lot of this also synergizes with on attack. And so as you read through these cards, you'll see Benthic 2 Tubes, the First Order Stormtrooper, Allegiant General Pride, Support ETA-2, TIE Bomber, Fifth Brother, every single one of them on attack. If Dengar is piloting something, it gains on attack. Fet's Fire Spray has on attack. IG-2000 is one of the very few things that does not, but then Darth Vader piloted onto something gains and on attack. And so we are using the Force synergy with Fifth Brother and Darth Vader and our leader unit, along with the on-attack synergy of Hotshot Maneuver to clear the way in a lot of cases. This deck plays very fast, but I also want you to note here that the sideboard is meant as a completely different playstyle with this deck. In the sideboarding options, what you would do is that you would remove several of the on-attack, so you can completely set this up without some of the 3-ofs and change them over. Leans more into the Force synergy and uses a lot of these cards as separatists so that you can activate Asajj. And what you would want to do is to clear out, as we said, several of the lesser on attack abilities here and replace them in and create more of a Force synergy along with your troopers to activate the big guy here. Sideboard is the second option. Either version plays fast and low to the ground. Very true to aggression. This deck, when I have tested it, often winds up ending the game before the Vader flip turn. Against a lighter space presence, a absolutely devastating play is Darth Vader in a TIE Bomber. Vader in that TIE Bomber turn 1, Vader into it on turn 2, and then attack. It does its indirect damage and then 3 to your target. On turn 4, or the 4 resource turn, you can attack with it again and then use aggression to ready it. So very quickly you can wind up with a lot of damage that soaks out, because if you were to do that set, that represents 9 damage to a target, 9 indirect, and then 3 pings, and then up to 3 to base if those pings cleared units. And so that is a truly devastating way to wind up playing this thing. If you wind up in the force side of it and the synergies work there, I've included several things that are units which are quite large for their deploy time. However, they are a little bit low on hit points. The reason for that, as we come back up and look at them, is that Dooku allows you to throw those units. Or you could use Asajj and use her exploit ability to pop one of those units, deal its indirect damage, and move on with a force unit on the board. That would also allow you to do things like use her underneath cost and play something like Force Throw to be able to clear a unit that you needed to. Let's move on. Command Toolbox. And here we're going to talk about what happens with Vader in green. Normally, if I'm playing Darth Vader, it is either in green because the Darth Vader unit from Spark of Rebellion is there, or I'm playing in blue. And so this is probably one of my favorite setups for Darth Vader. Access to ramp, as we know, is the biggest thing that you've got in the green color, in that command color. However, you do have a lot of very high utility things here. You have timely intervention, which can allow you to bring something in as an ambush. You have Palpatine's Return to bring back either your force units or anything that went into your discard pile, which can be very, very useful against things like Quinlan. Traitorous is in here as a toolbox card. If you're in green, Overwhelming Barrage remains one of the very best cards in the game. Colonel Yularen is a nice passive heal because a lot of your things will be green. Targets for Vader's deploy. Admiral Piet is a good one because if you're looking at Vader's deploy, you're already on 7. And so being able to drop something out that allows your reinforcement walker to come out with ambush is huge. You can also use a seasoned shore trooper because he now comes out +2 because you're at greater than 6 resources. Or the Phase 3 Dark Trooper sets you up a nice little sentinel. Your closers in a command deck are going to be in green. They are going to be the Devastator, the Relentless, the Spark of Rebellion, Darth Vader, and a Reinforcement Walker. Relentless may or may not be in the deck depending on how you size it, but Devastator, Darth Vader, and Reinforcement Walker are all there. Very powerful play lines exist in this. As we said, if you use Darth Vader and you wind up with Piet, then on the next turn, being able to play a Reinforcement Walker and have it come in with ambush, you can gain up to 6 health when that happens and really, really stabilize your board, because that's also happening as they're having to contend with your leader. Here we used a line from the Obi-Wan show, then you will die braver. No, this is from Rebels, I believe. Then you will die braver than most. We do have the kind of concession here of the First Order Stormtrooper, so that off of Darth Vader or as a first turn play, you are able to play them as a first turn play and utilize Vader's ping and do some damage to their base, or off of the Darth Vader unit, you're able to pull Piet or Yularen or any of the other 2s and play the First Order Trooper. This one we ran with Data Vault. I have tested this with ECL. We'll talk about that in just a minute. But because we're with Data Vault, we do have access to a little bit bigger card pool. So we went 3 of with Vader's lightsaber, and we did that because we have 6 opportunities to put that on Darth Vader. It is cheaper as a 3-of, and it is in our villainy pairing to be able to play that instead of open fire. We don't get to use it until a little bit later, but we do have enough both in our base health and in the early sentinels that I find this is a very, very useful card to put on the table. Standard ramp package here, super laser tech and resupply. You do have fallen lightsaber here, which is a very useful tool on any of your force units, or even to slap on something like your phase 3 dark trooper. There's not a whole lot worse than a 6/6 phase 3 dark trooper that grows. Overwhelming barrage is there. Darth Vader, the unit that can pilot some of your early ships, is there. You do have Ruthless Raider in here. Big things that you have access to in your sideboard. If you need another small unit, you can put Salacious Crumb in. If you're needing a little bit more passive healing, Consortium Star Viper. I do have the Turbo Laser Salvo in here. You don't have a whole lot of capital ships, but you don't need a capital ship to be able to do some massive damage. And this can kind of help soften up the ground units as well, because your leader is going to be pinging damage to them. Your leader is also on attack, going to be able to do damage to them. And so this can soften up some things for them to be able to break through. And then our closers, as we said, we've got Darth Vader, we've got the Reinforcement Walker, and Devastator. Why Data Vault? We have a 7 health leader, or a 7 cost leader, and we need the health to be able to get that to the table. And especially if we are using ramp, because either the Super Laser Technician or Resupply are not developing your board. They're developing a resource, but they're really not developing your board. There are more targets here for Vader Search. There's a deeper pool of 1s and 2s in this deck than there are in most. It allows a larger variety of those removal cards. Experiment with ECL, experiment with 30. Both of those are viable strategies. I like ECL slightly better, but it can be vulnerable in that ramp deck because you are 8 health under this. So, you're a couple of actions smaller. When I use ECL, I tend to pull back a couple of the Sabers, Ruthless Raiders, and Force Lightning, and just to kind of scale those back and get myself to a deck that fits ECL's card pool a little bit better. Play pattern for Vader Green is to ramp, and that's why I say that I prefer the larger health base if possible. Base pressure on your opponents is really not as important in the early game. You need stability and getting to stability, because if you can get to Devastator Reinforcement Walker, it's a really, really hard game for your opponents to win. That flip turn includes access to both your Darth Vader leader and the Darth Vader Spark of Rebellion unit. It also includes the access to be able to put Vader's saber on him and then overwhelming barrage off of him. And so that can represent a huge, huge swing in your opponent's board. The end game, as we've already talked about, is right there. By the way, the image in the background here is one of the early renderings from A New Hope when they were developing the characters. And this was Darth Vader, who changed a little, and this was Luke Skywalker, who changed a lot. I think at that time, Luke Starkiller, when they were still doing these renderings. Let's talk about the tools for Vigilance. Vigilance gives us targeted and 1-for-1 removal. And that's really what we're accessing in here. And so we're seeing Power of the Dark Side, we're seeing Takedown, Vanquish, Rivals Fall, Fell the Dragon, and the new card from Jump to Lightspeed, No Glory, Only Results. You have Sentinel access in here, which is not as prevalent in the other colors. And the breakpoints for that, you have Sentinels that are available at 2, 4, and 6 on the ground. And you have Sentinels that are available in the odds at 3, 5, and 7, as well as one that's in 6, but it's not one that I wind up using very often, that are out in space. It also has the very powerful and very well-known in-game units that are synergistic with what we're doing, which are Supreme Leader Snoke and the Avenger. So let's look at a Vigilance deck. Now, if you've seen Bossk Blue, you've seen most of this deck. Although we are not running as heavy on things like our bounties, we do have a couple of things that are there to grow our base a little bit. So let's take a look at what we got here. A little bit less of a win condition for this type of deck because of how powerful your late game units are is restock. And if I'm really worried about any one card in here, that might be the one that I would pull to add something off of my sideboard or to make something else a 3 of. We have a fine addition in here, and that is to both buy back our bounty for top target if we want it, or to buy back one of the sabers or any other of those events, conditions that are, not events, any other of those conditions that we want to buy back and play on either one of their units or one of ours. Top target is in here for a little bit of healing as well as the client. Shoot down gives us a nice early removal for space units that can also ping damage to their base. Make an opening is a nice one for things that do not take damage from your card effects, because it is not a damage, it is a -2/-2, which is not classified the way that everything else is. Here we see the first appearance of Open Fire. We have Power of the Dark Side. We use the Fallen Lightsaber because we have Fifth Brother and we have Darth Vader, Darth Maul, Emperor Palpatine, and Leader Snoke who can all use it. So we have Fallen Lightsaber in this deck. Perilous Position, exhaust a unit and give it the -2/-2. Take down if we get anything under 5. We have 3 of Vigilance. And then Darth Maul to be able to kind of take on a lot of things there on the ground. Quite often, if you are playing your removal, Darth Maul winds up with a little bit cleaner space than he might otherwise get. And if you manage to stick a lightsaber on him, then good luck to your opponents, because an 8/9 Maul that takes on 2 units at once is very, very difficult to defeat. You do have the Darth Vader unit here. He is not going to go out and pilot the Avenger, as it is really one of your only space units that's in this deck. So a lot of your removal is probably going to be used on things that are in space. Rivals Fall to defeat a unit, and just to let you have access to something that can straight clear a leader or a unit or anything else that does not have specific text on it. And then we go into our late game where we're talking about Palpatine, Snoke, and Avenger. Super Laser Blast is another of these that you might consider swapping out. And if I was considering swapping it out, it would depend on what I'm playing into. Into something that is heavy control, you're probably swapping that out and wanting to add a little bit of things like your Bounty Hunter crew, even though it is out of aspect. You could also use Bazine in here out of aspect if you wanted. You have enough blue that Lieutenant Childson is a good play. Into ramp, Syndulla, Cham Syndulla is a wonderful play as well. You've got a little bit of card drawing engine in here, but if I was going to go with Colossus is where I would really start to add a lot of card draw to this. Play pattern for Vader Blue is extremely similar to Bossk Blue. And if you want a full rundown of Bossk Blue, I would highly advise that you check out the Bossk Deep Dive that's on this channel. We talked about that pretty specifically. But starting with the 3-resource turn, you have multiple means of direct removal all the way between there and the Vader flip. It is less focused on the bounties, and mill is not as high a priority. The force synergy that's in here is quite potent, but very few early game units, much like Bossk. You are able, with Fifth Brother, to use those still at their full effect, but it is not as much a priority in this deck as in others. Your late game is very powerful. Getting there is the challenge. One of the least played versions of Vader would be Vader Yellow, Cunning. And so let's look at the toolbox that we have available to us if we were to play Vader in yellow. So far, I've shown you a very aggressive red deck, a mid-range, kind of moderate mid-range to late game control deck, command deck, a very control-focused Vigilance deck, and here we're going to kind of span that mid-game again, but on the earlier side. And so you have some access to the very powerful events Surprise Strike, No Good to Me Dead is an exhaust effect, Waylay to bounce things back. It improves your space package, and you can get things like the Zygerian Starhopper or the Contracted Jumpmaster. But we're going to lean into Underworld here, and we're going to lean into things like Bossk, Forlom, Syndicate Lackeys, Bounty Hunter's Crew. A lot of these units that are more familiar with playing the Underworld game. In truth, Cad Bane probably plays this pairing a little better, just because you are paired with Underworld and his action does not cost you a resource. But Vader can play this efficiently, and let's take a look at how. Still, again, we've got early one-drops in Greedo. We have that full force package, even though we are not looking to have as many units that are force. We still have that package of Force Lightning and Force Throw. If you're running yellow and you don't have Hotshot Blasters in your deck, I am not sure what you are doing. Allegiant General Pride, I very much like in this deck because he is able to do the indirect damage and he is able to clear non-unique upgrades. The Starhopper is great, has the When Defeated effect, and the Starhopper, the Droid Missile Platform, the Elite P-38 Starfighter all synergize with Count Dooku, as does the Ruthless Raider if you chose to throw it. But I would prefer to throw 4 damage with a 3-cost unit than I would with a 6-cost unit. That's my preference. Anyway, what you can do with this deck and how I wind up playing this is to try and put a couple of these small units on the board, and then as I'm using especially things like the Starhopper and the P-38, or the Starhopper and the Droid Missile Platform, play Dooku. Throw 6 damage at somebody. Leave behind a 6/6 with really nothing in front of you, and kind of clear the board that way. You have plenty of options there. You know, if you can get down a Dooku on the 4-resource turn and then Surprise Strike with him, you know, you've got a 9/6 overwhelm that is really, really hot to handle. This again has the package in it of Forlom and Zuckuss, which we know the combination of the two of them can leave behind a very big body. Cham Syndulla is in here as anti-ramp in your sideboard, as well as Bazine to kind of pick off things that are in your opponent's hand. One other interesting card of note here, that this is the first time that I ran it somewhere in one of my deck lists, is I Am Your Father, which allows your opponent the choice, so they're always going to choose the thing that benefits you the least, to either deal 7 damage to one of their units or let you draw 3 cards. This leverages those events of yellow with a very powerful late game leader, mixes in multiple targets for Dooku. Remember that if you happen to throw things that have a buff to them, that the buff goes because the buff goes with them. Don't let your opponents try to talk you into something different, because those units all happen at once. This deck is much more aggressive than its counterpart in green, and often does not make the 7-resource turn when I have play tested it. A couple of final thoughts here. Any version of green-red should consider Darth Vader Saber. Just because you have access to playing 7 of Darth Vader in your deck, it makes sense to have that available to you. Another thing that you can play with that, especially if you are playing with a little bit less of a ramp package or trying to get to your late game a little faster, is to play Eject. Put Darth Vader down put him in a ship for 3, and if it looks like they're targeting that ship to try and remove it, pop him to the ground, eject him. Remember the utility of Force Lightning. even without a Force unit on the table. The Force Lightning is in that deck. There is nothing quite as sad looking as Kiara dealing half damage to the deck and then being an 0-4 because it negated her text. When playing Dooku, as multiple versions of this deck do, utilize those units. Know that they're damage for you. It's a force throw that you already paid for. These are not definitive versions of the deck by any means. They're fun versions. I think that, as I said, the blue one is probably the most viable of the group, probably followed by the green. But they're all pretty fun to play. I have very much enjoyed play testing with them and just kind of seeing how they work and tinkering with them to get them to these forms. I also appreciate the people who voted in our poll. Thank you very much for doing that. About 1 in 8 of the subscribers did it by just sheer number. So thank you very much if you are a subscriber and have done that. If you are not and you're here at this point in the video, please consider subscribing. You'll see more content like this. We'll put up more polls. We'll have some other leaders. We'll do meta breakdowns. We'll do a lot of other things, all mostly around Star Wars Unlimited. You might catch a short every now and again of my dogs. Last little thing to note, Darth Vader remains one of the most iconic villains in film. And he did that in under 10 minutes of screen time in A New Hope. Very quickly became one of the most recognizable characters in all of cinema. And the durability of that from a film released in 1977 remains very impressive. That's all I got for this time. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you get to play around with some of these, and good luck. We'll see you next time.